Good evening, and welcome to Increasing Motivation in Census Test Takers. I am Alexandra Price, and I will be your moderator for this discussion this evening. In the state of Alabama, all high school juniors are required to take the ACT in the spring of their junior year. This requirement is what is known as census test taking. So, the two schools at the center of this particular study have state report card grades that are a C. The one has a C, one has a D, and both schools desire to improve their state report card grade, as well as the system, which also has a C, desires to improve its state report card grade. And in order to do that in a high school setting, they must move juniors into a higher level on the ACT. The ACT is divided into 4 performance levels, and schools receive no points for any student scoring at level 1. So the schools that are part of this study had high numbers of students scoring at level 1. 75%, as a matter of fact, of the students scored at level 1. And the school leadership has a theory that this is due to a lack of motivation and a disengagement with the content on behalf of a large number of the high school juniors. Many of the juniors in these schools are not intended to go to a four-year university, so the question becomes, how do we motivate these students to want to prepare for the ACT, participate in ACT preparatory activities, and do well on the test on test day? So we need a way to move these students from level 1 to a higher level, which leads us to our research questions. Can relating a low interest test to a high interest test increase motivation? And can creating a crosswalk of skills between the ASVAB Math Aptitude Test and the ACT Math Subtest motivate non-college bound students to work on strengthening skills relevant to both tests, leading to increased ACT performance? When I started researching this idea of increasing motivation by using skills that could be crosswalked between the two tests, I looked into various areas of research, everything from blogs to dissertations to professional papers. I did not find a single source that looked at the two tests in the context of this study. So I had studies that address census testing motivation. As you see, the Steedle study, Are They Trying? Motivation in State Census Testing. There were studies that looked at strategies to help increase student performance on taking the ACT. Some of these were individual strategies. Some of them looked at student characteristics. Others looked at school characteristics and school culture and climate, but no studies related the two tests in the manner of this current study. So my study design was a mixed methods design that utilized some quantitative data such as polls and surveys, but relied mainly on observational data. Initial data was collected using a poll, and final data was collected using a one-question survey. Observational data was used to note participation, and I would track completion and mastery rates and participation rates using Google Sheets. Now, initially, as I said, I started with a poll. If the goal is going to be to move students from level 1 to a higher level by trying to find a way to intrinsically motivate them, then we need to know which students we are capable of moving. So I did a poll to determine what their plans were post-high school. 54% of the students that were polled intended to attend a four-year college or institution. 16, representing only 9%, chose to go to the military, which was a surprise to me. 26% chose a two-year institution, 3% chose workforce, and 8% gave no response. 55 students were not part of the polled group of students for a variety of reasons. Some of it had to do with their schedules and leaving class early to go to other places. Some of it was because they were absent. So there were 241 students total, and most of them did participate in the student poll. My first aha moment was in the number of students going to the military or choosing to go to the military. I had expected that that number would be higher, and therefore the footprint of the study would be greater. I thought there would be more students that would be capable of moving into an area of higher motivation based on a preconceived idea of the number of students that would choose the military. So once I informed the students of what the protocol was, that we were going to focus on 200 and 300 level college and career readiness standards, those that are on the ACT, and that we were going to correlate those to the math questions from the ASVAB. And I created a crosswalk document. Although the students were not exposed to that document, they were informed of what our focus would be. For the students who are taking the ACT with an eye on attending a four-year college or university, the goal was for them to be so automatic at those particular 200 and 300 level standards that they would take almost no time completing those questions on test day. For students headed to the military, the goal was for them to see that the ACT prep could also help them improve their ASVAB scores. And the ASVAB is an aptitude test that is used to determine military suitability. So these skills would be transferred into the questions that they would need to answer on the ASVAB. So the goal was to push those students into a higher level. There were 6 site visits after they were informed of this, and once I started introducing them to activities at the level that fit the protocol. After those 6 site visits, students were then surveyed to determine if the protocol created a change in motivation. This is the chart, the bar graph showing participation and mastery, the 2 markers that I used to determine whether or not there was greater motivation. My first expected result was that participation rates and completion rates would increase once students were able to correlate the low interest test for them, the ACT, to the higher interest test for them, the ASVAB. I was not correct. The blue bar, the mastery bar, stayed fairly high throughout. So always in the high 90s, 90 percentile, except for one date, and that was September the 11th. The mastery showed the most movement. Mastery levels ranged from low to fairly high, a little over 80%. And I will note that the dates that had the greatest mastery were the dates that the students were introduced to competition-based collaborative activities. So those activities seem to have a higher interest level and push them to be more motivated to master the content than did any other type of activity. The other expected result is that more students would be motivated to participate in the ACT prep activities when they learned about the correlation between the lower level math skills and the math ASVAB test. I was correct to a certain extent. I did not get to survey the second school due to the conclusion of this study. However, at the school site where I was able to survey students, out of 96 students that responded, 22 said that they were more motivated once they found out about the correlation, which is more than the 16 total from the 2 schools that said that they were headed to military. So in that aspect, the study did do what it was supposed to do in creating motivation in students who otherwise might not have been motivated. However, given that 54% of these students should be intrinsically motivated already, because 54% responded that they were headed to a four-year institution, there is still a gap between expectation of who would perform well and how many actually performed well on the ACT. 54% said they wanted to attend a four-year institution, but only 25% of the students scored above level 1 range on the ACT. Last year. So there is a gap between those who should be intrinsically motivated and those who show that they are by performing well on the test. This does close some of the gap, but it does not close all of the gap. So schools will need to look for other ways to motivate students to do well. So given that a large percentage of the state report card grade, 45%, is related to ACT performance, because that's where academic growth and academic performance show up on the state report card grade, this would be significant for schools to use to try to motivate students to do better in census testing. So relating the ASVAB to the ACT does lead to some changes in motivation, but as I said on the previous slide, they still need to reach the other students. 26% chose two-year college. So how then do we motivate those students? So that is one limitation of this study. Another limitation is that the study was limited to using publicly available aggregate data, so there was no individual student data used. The study may yield different results in a different geographical area. As I said, I came into this with some idea of how many students would choose military, and I was wrong by a significant amount. I thought it would be about 15% based on my 27-year teaching in high schools and the number of students that I had that chose the military as a career option. It was a much smaller number than what I would have expected. The study may also yield different results using a larger population of students. So sample size is important. So the next step is again, schools may need to look in a new direction to increase motivation in census test takers. This is only aimed to improve motivation in those who would not be motivated because the ASVAB is their primary test of concern, not the ACT. Again, it does nothing to motivate those who are two-year college bound. It may have moved some, but there's no way to determine since I did not compare the survey results to the previous poll results individual by individual. I kept it anonymous. A potential research area could involve designing modules that were based on cooperative and competitive activities, since those seem to be the ones that had the highest mastery rate. I would like to thank you for your attention and for going through this with me today. If you have any further questions, you may contact me at 334-233-2328 or at aprice7@aum.edu.